Okay. So, hey everyone. Welcome to the weekly Saying Goodbye to Burnout topic. Today we're going to be talking about moral injury. Um, so, I was looking up a definition for moral injury because I like to just keep up to date on what's going on with that particular topic because it is fairly new. And as you'll see in the definition that I read, and I'm just looking at my computer screen, when I'm looking at the definition of moral injury, it originated from conversations from effects that our veterans, right, our military members, our soldiers were experiencing. And so moral injury is, so in traumatic or unusually stressful circumstances, people may perpetrate, fail to prevent, or witness events that contradict deeply held moral beliefs and expectations. When someone does something that goes against their beliefs, this is often referred to as an act of commission. And when they fail to do something in line with their beliefs, that is often referred to as an act of omissions. Individuals may also experience betrayal from leadership, others in positions of power, or peers that can result in adverse outcomes. Moral injury is the distressing psychological, behavioral, social, and sometimes spiritual aftermath of exposure to such events. A moral injury can occur in response to acting or witnessing behaviors that go against an individual's values and moral beliefs. So, I read that definition because I think it's really important to think about in our own lives where, I think in the military, when we're talking about war, right, when we're talking about maybe being directed to kill someone, right, like a child or somebody who doesn't look like they're armed, or right, where you are ordered to perpetrate an act that goes against your moral compass. We can really see very obvious in the military where moral injury might come into play. The really interesting thing about being in the healthcare profession is that, and I'm not even, I'm not working in a hospital. I'm not working in a place where people's necessarily lives are at stake. But working in clinics, working in the system, I have regularly been in positions where, because of the money that we either need or don't have, decisions were made based on insurance, based on finances, based on space for folks, right? Like actual physical beds. Decisions were made on whether or not we needed someone new to come through and somebody had to leave, right? Many times in my experience, I watched these decisions be made, and being a part of those decisions where we are not acting necessarily in the best interest of the client or the patient. We are acting on the basis of finances, of insurance companies, of what's best for the business versus what's best for the client. How can we cut corners? How can we get more people to come through? How can we charge more for a service that insurance will then reimburse us for? And over time, right, it's not so obvious as, as this experience in the military where it's like, very against some very obvious moral codes, right? We can see where that happens. But every single time I, as a healthcare professional, am ordered, right, dictated, told to carry out a decision or or give treatment that is more based on numbers, more based on the business than what I know, right, from my schooling, from my observation of the patient in the moment, right, from what I know as a professional. If it goes against that, every single time that happens, that's another moral injury. And it's a fascinating, I only learned about this the last couple of years. I didn't actually know that this was a thing. And the reason that it's so important is because so many of you in this group are experiencing vicarious trauma, right? You're experiencing the trauma. It's not just burnout, right? Like, I think for me, I thought I was just burnt out. I thought I was just sick of the job. I thought I just was tired of seeing the same kind of clients again, maybe, or like maybe I wasn't getting a lot of support from my company, and it just, right, like I just didn't feel, I felt burnt out. But what I didn't recognize was the experience of that moral injury, little ones, over and over and over again, where making a phone call to CPS, CPS responds in a way that either a kid doesn't get the help that they need, or they kind of come in and take over a situation that really could have been handled in like a class type of way, right? Or I think my initial, when I look back, right, because now I understand moral injury, but I didn't at the time. So when I look back, working at the residential treatment facility with at-risk teens, this was the main place where I started to experience moral injury unbeknownst to me, right? I didn't recognize that was happening. What I saw was that when I was first hired, the company had a lot of money from the state because there was a lot of money through autism. There was a lot of money for mental health, and this was in Hawaii. And I forget what year it was, somewhere around 2000, there was a lot of money came into the state for helping out our youth. And so when I first was hired, there was a lot of money. And so the program, that was this amazing program, could run in a way that really benefited the kids, the teens. We had a boat that the kids learned how to sail, right? And then they would team with a captain and a couple of staff members, and they would go inter-island on the ocean. They would sail this huge boat inter-island. They learned a lot of skills. They learned how to respect their abilities. They had family therapy. Their parents would, because a lot of these kids were from other islands, their parents would be flown to Oahu so that they could have sessions and they could work out things so that when the kids went back home after they're done with the program, they would be successful, right? And so for a long time, we had this money that allowed us to work and make decisions that were most beneficial to the clients themselves, right? This was a program that worked because it was run in the way that we understand therapy to work, right? And then over time, we started to lose the money. Over time, insurance companies didn't pay as much. Over time, they wanted us to take more kids for the same amount of money. And over time, we started to get residents in the treatment facility that were what we called hospital-based level, right? Where there's really kind of a danger to self and others. And that need is above what this program was offering. And so every time those little things happened, right? Like we graduate a kid too soon. We graduate a kid without having his family come for family sessions. We always did phone sessions, but we couldn't afford to fly them anymore, right? And so then we're sending kids back into a situation that's not healthy. And so we do all this work here and then we send them back. We have kids who are, kind of hospital level, hiding knives under their pillows, and we only have 2 staff members that are, it's not a locked facility, and there's no things in place for that danger, right? And it's not the child's fault, it's just that he's in a program that is not meant for his needs. And over and over and over, we started to get different kinds of clients, right? And every single time I was a part of a treatment team making a decision that more and more often was based on numbers and insurance company and finances and business versus what those kids actually needed. More and more, I didn't know what was happening, but it was like I was acting against my own moral compass, right? And it's not as obvious. It's much more, it's like an undercurrent, right? And it just, what they found that happens is it builds, it builds, it builds, it builds. And so, that was just one of the places that I experienced this, right? I worked in school systems, I worked with military families, I worked with a lot of different groups. And with each of those, right, because we are in a system that is a business that makes decisions based on finances, my decisions aren't supposed to be made on that, but the business makes decisions based on insurance and finances. Because of that, constantly I've experienced this at multiple different locations over time, and constantly those just build, right? We start to hang on to those. So I want you to think about in your own place of work, in your own place of employment, and maybe this current employment that you have or in previous, where is it that you have experienced moral injury? Be really specific. I'm, I guess, quote unquote, lucky, right? That in a therapy perspective, what happens is, I'll tell you the one that's really painful for me now, and I'm really trying to figure out how to handle this. With our Colorado Medicaid, just one of the rays, we get 12 sessions of hour-long therapy. And then after that 12, you have to authorize to be able to see them for 12 more hour-long sessions. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't see them anymore, but you can see them for short sessions. And for some people, that's fine, right? For some people, it's like, oh, after these 12 sessions, we're no longer in crisis mode, and we can do shorter check-ins, and we can keep things going, and we can maintain the progress that we've had and still continue to make progress. However, there are some folks who are suicidal, or who are experiencing major depression, or who are experiencing intense pain and suffering because of their symptoms. And because I don't do EMDR, there's like a couple different things that, evidence-based, whatever, how insurance companies make decisions. Because I do a lot of CBT and solution-focused work, none of my clients get authorized for those next 12. And so all of my Medicaid clients get 12 sessions, and then we have to reduce the time for each of them. And so it creates this situation where it's just not in the best interests of them, right? And so what do I do about that, knowing that a short session is it's not enough, right? It's like we have the hour that becomes this practice of opening up. It gives us time to open up the wounds, and then it gives us time to package it back up in a way that's safe for you to go back home to your family and school and work, right? So you're not like an open, raw wound walking around. And can I do that in a shorter amount of time, right? And then if not, what are the other options, right? Is it like lie about what I'm doing, get paid less for what I'm doing, right? Seeing them for an hour, even though you can only get reimbursed for, whatever the shorter amount of time is, like 40 minutes or so, right? Then what is my response? So this becomes a real moral dilemma. And again, like I said, I think in the therapy world, I'm lucky, I guess, right? Like this isn't, for most of my people, this is not life or death, but it sucks. It's not what's best for them. I think in the hospitals, in the clinics, in a lot of those types of settings, sometimes you are faced with decisions that are life and death. You are faced with, can I give this patient what they truly need when insurance won't cover it, right? And then it's like, well, I'm recommending this, but insurance isn't going to cover it. And I know without insurance, you're not going to be able to pay for it. So then how do we make decisions there? And then I know you all have been at clinics or hospitals where, there was, I had an injury once a couple of years ago where I looked at my bill and I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. They are charging so much money for things that should not cost as much as they do. And I'm not talking like, listen, I am a huge proponent of people getting paid for the work that they're doing. I want my doctor to get paid. I would prefer my doctor get paid more than they get paid. But some of the, what is it called, right? Like the bandages, I got crutches, some of those types of things were so overpriced, right? Where I could have just gone to Walgreens and picked up crutches for extraordinarily less amount of money, right? But I wasn't paying for it. My insurance company was paying for it. And so the charge was extraordinary. And I see this happen. Everywhere, right? With when insurance is in play. So I want you to think about, have there been in your career, have there been moments where either because you made the decision, a supervisor made the decision, the treatment team made the decision, the company made the decision, insurance company dictated it, that you went against your better judgment for a patient, for a client? And did it happen often? What kinds of situations have you reconciled with those moments? Are you still holding on to those? And I think, if you are in therapy, if you are working with a coach, those are really good moments to bring to the professional that you're working with. One of my clients, a nurse, I haven't seen him in quite a while, but he got a lot of relief of symptoms when we started to unpack some of these things that in his experience, and this could be your experience if you're in a similar type of situation, in his experience, it was like one tragedy happens and then there's no space to unpack it with anyone, right? There's no time. You just are given the next tragedy, right? The next person who needs your help is on the other side of the door, right? It's like I finish with this one and I go to the next one and then I go to the next one, and there's no time, there's no space for me to unpack these things. And he got a lot of relief from just going through one by one. It was like, I like just telling the story and deciding what to do with it, right? Do I want to hang on to this anymore? Do I want to beat myself up for this still? Did I even realize that I was hanging on to this? Got a lot of relief. And so I encourage you guys to do the same. It is way better, I've noticed, in the very beginning, when I was teaching about compassion fatigue, right? And a lot of these moral injury situations are quite traumatic. And, I used to teach that really finding a coworker, finding a colleague who is like, understands, right? They go through similar types of situations. They're strong enough to hear these things, right? Like, especially if you're like a nurse or a doctor, or if you're a therapist, right? Like there's some things that people get squeamish about, right? It's not like a conversation to have with your mom necessarily, unless she's a doctor, nurse, whatever, right? Like I can't talk to my mom about the trauma that folks are experiencing because she wouldn't be able to handle those details, right? Like just some people can't handle those details, and that's fine. That's not her job. But I used to recommend finding a coworker. If it's a really deep one, I'm finding that sometimes, even though in the literature it says that this tertiary vicarious trauma isn't really a thing, right? And so if we talk about vicarious trauma, um, let's just say there's a car accident, right? So the patient experiences the trauma, they come in, and it's not our trauma, right? But they're telling us the story of the accident, and we take on the trauma, right? So this is the secondary trauma. Initial trauma is with the patient. Secondary trauma is either witnessing, hearing about, or like dealing with the aftermath of the trauma, right? So car accident, initial. Secondary is myself. And then what they were teaching is to, you know, really kind of like tell this story with a relaxed body to like a coworker, a colleague, somebody who can handle this kind of a situation. And that tertiary, right, the third person wasn't going to take on this trauma in the same way. And I have to say, every once in a while, I've heard a story where like this person does take on some trauma. And so then it's like, so now they've taken on trauma. And then I'm taking on the secondary trauma of them being traumatized in it. So I really recommend that you find a professional for some of these situations, right? If it's just, and in your, in your work and your colleagues, who's going to be able to actually hear these stories, right? Which veterinarians are able to hear about, mistakes made, or an animal passing away, or the way that a family responds to a situation that couldn't be helped, right? The coworkers who can probably handle it, and really being careful with other people's emotional experience, right? Really speaking to them beforehand and finding out if they're in a space where they can hear some of this and they can kind of be present with you. But some of these things should really be taken to like a therapist who can handle some of those things. Really good coaches who have been working for a long time and who can hold space and not take that on. Okay. So to go through, take a look at what kind of experiences have you had in the past. Feel free to share some of those things with us. Written out in a story, pay attention to like, ooh, is this something that, is going to really, like, somebody reading this is going to also kind of have a traumatic experience from it. But give us, the basic details, like, in my history in the hospital, I had to withhold certain medications, or what are they called? I can't think of them. Interventions, or right, I had to withhold something because insurance wouldn't cover it, or this person kept coming in because they couldn't get the thing that they really need, right? Like I have a client right now who's going to the doctor and insurance won't cover the thing that she needs to get better. And so she can't afford it. And so instead of getting the treatment she needs, has to consistently go back to the hospital and treat symptoms instead of treating original problem, right? And so that's her experience. But then on the other side, I am sure her doctor and her nurses are experiencing that moral injury of not being able to offer the thing that they know is going to help make her feel better, right? So go through your history, share with us like the generalities, right? We want to be here for you. We want to support you. And let us know, do you have you don't have to talk to us about your therapist, but, are you working with somebody? Because I think one of the other things we need to work on is reducing the stigma around getting help. Right now I'm working with a coach, but periodically I work with a therapist, right? Depending on where I am, what I'm needing. I'm going to go find another therapist because I can't work with my previous therapist, but all of this COVID stuff, right? Like I need my own therapist. I need to be able to work through stuff. And I do coaching for other types of situations. Are you working with somebody? There's no weakness. There's no failure in speaking to somebody and having them help you unpack these, what can be really traumatic situations, even if you don't look back and, right, the big T versus little t. Big T, car accident, big T, sexual assault, big T, right? Physical violence, little t, trauma, you know, moral injury over moral injury, seeing other people's traumas, right? Those things build up. We can't dismiss those things. So finding somebody to unpack those things with is super important. Okay. So share with us. I hope that this was helpful for you. If you are interested in, I am going to be doing a 6-week group. It starts next week. I am not on the ball. I'm like terrible at telling people what is available. So I hope that you can join me. It starts Wednesday. It's at 4 p.m. Mountain, which is 6 p.m. Eastern time. I put it at that time because I know a lot of you normally during my workday is not as accessible to you. So hopefully 6 p.m. Eastern, we can get some of you involved, right? This is a group about thriving instead of just surviving through the rest of this pandemic. I don't think we need to just continue to go day by day, right? I feel like we can get to a place where we are truly energetic, motivated, feeling on purpose, regardless of what's going on with COVID-19 and the political situation, right? Like regardless of all that, I think we can thrive. We can really be at the forefront, be a model for how to take care of ourselves, regardless of all of this other stuff. So look for the invitation in the Facebook group, and I hope you join me. I'm so excited. Answer those questions in the Facebook group. I think this will also be on YouTube. And so if you're finding this on YouTube, look for the link to the Saying Goodbye to Burnout for Healthcare Professionals Facebook group. That link will be underneath the video. Okay, everyone. So good to talk to you today. Moral injury, fascinating. Okay, bye.